how to say that. And so there's lots of things I find interesting about it. And today I just picked one of many things that are interesting to me, and hopefully it will be to you. And it's on artificial intelligence used in med devices or in just the medical field in general. So I'll give us a little intro on what is AI. We're going to actually have, there's a lot of you. I'm going to try and do an activity and you guys, so that you're not just on a call without, I don't know, so that you actually have to do something. And when you do something, you'll learn something. So let's see, slideshow and then share. Do it. Okay, excellent. That's the start. Oh, can I get screen sharing, please? While we're waiting, I love cats. This is my funny mug of the day. Good kitty, bad kitty, hiss, meow hiss. Have a giggle.
I believe you should be able to share now.
Okay. Yes, I can. Thank you. All right. So if you see my head moving back and forth, I have two monitors. So in one direction, I'm like looking at the camera. When I'm over here, I'm double checking my slides. All right, artificial intelligence in medical devices. This photo is of myself and the first two cohorts of the students, not a very large program, but a very tightly knit and happy one. In fact, the two people on the outside, they started as PPC students, so that's our pre-med certificate program. And after that certificate, they stayed on for the extra year to get the master's in med device engineering and are now off to medical school. So hopefully their engineering skills will come in useful in the future to design some cool med devices. So how is AI used in medicine? There are lots of different approvals, and this graphic may be too small for you to see, but it has, starting as early as 2014, which is, gosh, it seems like not that long ago, but I guess it's a while ago. AliveCore was approved. So step one, the FDA is very slow to approve stuff, especially new technologies, especially when it's hard to explain to them how it works, to verify it. And one of the challenges with AI and machine learning and all that is like, oftentimes people are like, it's a magic box and stuff comes out and it's like, the FDA doesn't like that. But they finally joined the bandwagon in 2014. AliveCore made a automated system for detecting atrial fibrillation. So if you're having a heart attack, based on ECG signals. So rather than having to have a technician or some kind of care provider looking at your EKG or ECG, the computer could do that. That has since developed over many years. At one point, I bought a little device that did that as well. And if you're curious, the first time you do the measurement, they send it to a doctor. And then after that, to verify that it's functional for you as an individual, and then it goes into machine learning. That device is now where the Apple Watch ECG got its technology. So it went from very novel to in many people's hands. So there's a lot of these cardiology kind of devices. Actually, it even shows here on the graphic if I look, squint. Yeah, 2018, Apple gets their FDA approval. So even though it's based on the same technology, any kind of minor change requires a new approval. So that's why it's on there. So all of these ECG related stuff are in the cardiology section. There's a lot of psychiatry related stuff. And then you'll see the biggest one is in radiology, and that's because that's all image recognition. So using artificial intelligence to identify things like tumors and lesions and other things, and so forth. But there's lots of applications. So med devices are a wide field. It's essentially all of medical stuff that is not pharmacology. So it's defined as something that's used to diagnose, treat, mitigate, or prevent a disease or condition. And then I didn't put the asterisk, and the asterisk is it's not metabolized. This includes dentistry, it includes veterinary care. So very, very broad. Some of the areas or fields are in vitro diagnostics. So if you have a sample removed from a patient and diagnosed, that's in vitro diagnostics. We're all familiar with our COVID testing nowadays. Those are all IVDs. Assistive technology is something that I get excited about. It's usually in the fields of occupational therapy and physical therapy, devices that are designed to help people engage in their everyday life. Drug delivery is a field where it's a combination of pharmacology and devices. How do we deliver drugs? Well, sometimes it's just a pill, and then that's just a pill is a pill. Sometimes we use a syringe. The syringe is a medical device. Sometimes we have an insulin pump. Well, that's a much more complicated device. There are perfusion systems and stuff like that. So drug delivery is a growing field of figuring out ways to deliver drugs locally to the correct part of the body, so that to minimize bad effects and not damage other tissue. Wearables. So that's your Apple Watch is an example of a wearable. Other wearables are less novel. Your eyeglasses are a wearable medical device. And then there's just a lot more. So moving forward, I'm going to tell you a little bit about AI. So what is AI and machine learning? It's words that get tossed around a lot. It's very exciting, and then people get upset about it, about the robot apocalypse, whatever. So artificial intelligence is just an attempt to design an intelligent agent that perceives the environment and makes a decision to maximize a goal. That is not a high barrier for intelligence, and I'll give a couple examples in a minute. Actually, maybe I should have done those examples before the activity, whatever. Yeah, so machine learning is actually a bit of a subset of that. So machine learning is an artificial intelligence, but it gives computers the ability to learn from data rather than being explicitly programmed. So in artificial intelligence, you can tell the computer, if these are your inputs, this should be your output. Keep going. And that's very explicit. And that's why I said it doesn't feel very sophisticated. In machine learning, they're like, here's some data, and normally we would expect these results. Here's some new data. What do you think the results are? So that's machine learning is usually what people are thinking about when they throw around the word AI. And then there's a few different categories of it. So supervised learning is the example I just gave. You provide information about your input data and what the output should look like, and then have it learn from that to make new guesses, and either classifying it, like putting it into categories, or coming up with a new value. Like if my blood pressure is whatever, sorry, there's if there are, if your blood pressure is this and your heart rate is that, a classification would be like, what condition do they have? Or if it's a value, like what's their life expectancy? I don't know, sorry to grim examples. Unsupervised learning is you don't have a preview of what it should be. It's like, here's some data. Can you find clusters? Usually like, oh, there's something unique about this. And then once you find a cluster, then you can, once the program identifies clusters, then you can say like, let's try and see what's actually different about these groups. And then finally, that's unsupervised learning. And then finally, reinforcement learning. It learns as it goes. So each iteration of categorizing or so forth, it will continue. So we are going to do a little activity. Imagine a medical device that currently relies on a person to observe a situation that then affects their decision for action. So currently, what I mean by that is I should have rephrased this. Imagine a situation where a person has to observe a patient and then make a decision. Now imagine a medical device, an artificial intelligence device that will do the same. So what I mean is translate that into an AI opportunity. So again, using the definition for AI, an attempt to design an intelligent agent that perceives the environment and makes a decision to maximize the goal. So what I want from that, when you translate that statement, identify what is it that's being observed in the original by a person, in the AI version by the computer, what is the goal that they're trying to maximize, and then what decision gets affected. And I'm going to stop share for a quick moment, and I'm going to put you guys into breakout rooms. There's a lot of you, and my guess is some of you have other things going on, so I'm going to put you in rather, oh wait, there's no breakout rooms on here? Ooh. So much for that. Is there a it's too late to add breakout rooms to this session, isn't it?
I believe so, yes, unfortunately.
Okay. Let's try it a different way. I don't shoot. We'll use the chat somehow. So
process, but we could mix discords and then have like separate rooms on the Discord chats. Like,
yeah, that's too complicated. We'll skip that. Thanks for the offer. Yeah. So if people are willing to try and throw out an idea in the chat of a situation, a healthcare situation where someone makes an observation, makes a decision, takes an action. An unconscious patient. Okay, so thank you. That's like a scenario. So let's identify what the healthcare provider, we observe. So the observation, what's the observation there? They're unconscious, right? What are we trying to maximize?
Life expectancy.
Life expectancy. How about more in the immediate term? Adjusting the dose of insulin. So that's another one. So adjusting dose of insulin according to current blood sugar. And this is a great one for AI. I'm going to finish the unconscious patient one, and then we'll do the dose one, the insulin one, because that's actually very, like, definitely a goal for people. And another one that's sort of being slowed down by FDA approval. So identify an unconscious patient. We're going to maximize their consciousness, I presume, right? So we want to revive them, or, well, unless they're intentionally unconscious, but let's ignore that scenario. There are forced comas for certain kinds of things, but whatever. And then what decision can we make?
Well, we could see how, depending on how advanced the system is, can it like to try and determine what the reason is for their unconscious state? Like if it is something like that, insulin levels are too low, or maybe they aren't getting enough oxygen to their head.
Yeah, so, and then someone else had another idea here for the unconscious patient. So I said the goal was to make them conscious. Another goal here that Francisco offered is to make them stable, right? So just make sure that unconsciousness doesn't deteriorate into a worse condition. So, again, I'm not a super medical person, so how do we keep people stable? What's an action you can take? One example of an action you can take to keep people stable.
A pulmonary pump could be used if they stop breathing in the unconscious state to make sure they're still getting oxygen.
Okay, so we could So the AI, an artificial, and this is what's great about pie in the sky stuff. You don't have to build it. You can just imagine computers having these talents and helping offload some of the challenges while leaving time for providers to do other kinds of work and things that are meaningful, right? So an AI that identifies the person as unconscious, has the goal of keeping them stable, and makes a decision whether to provide pulmonary assistance or not, right? So imagine this could be in a hospital setting. It's not like you have to necessarily find a person unconscious in the street. You don't have like a robot AI out there like looking for unconscious people, but if they're in a hospital and they're kind of in critical care or something, and then it can like decide when to turn things on and off. Devia, you have a question?
I was about to say CPR. And in addition to CPR, like what caused them to be unconscious? Was it a heart defect? So pacemakers could come into play there.
Right. So if we do have some super robot of the future, maybe it could provide different kinds of care. Is it going to try and defibrillate you, intubate you, throw a glass of water in your face, or just let you rest? So that's the decision-making thing. Hold on just one second. Sorry. So now we have lots of ideas. Thank you so much. So adjusting the dose of insulin according to blood sugar. So that's that has all three elements in it, right? We measure the glucose levels. We decide whether they need insulin. We apply insulin, or rather, it doesn't even have to be that the AI does the action. It just suggests an action is also okay. A surgeon using internal cameras to decide whether to continue cutting. So you can use, I said that there was a lot of like image processing stuff. So maybe the image processing can tell you whether you've cut out a full tumor or not. Help. Yeah, so lots of good stuff, right? So an example of artificial intelligence, not necessarily machine learning, that exists is our implantable defibrillators, right? And intracardiac defibrillator. So that constantly monitors your ECG, and if you start to have fibrillation, it will shock you. So that's technically AI. It's not machine learning. So so now I'm going to go back to screen share. That worked out. That wasn't so bad, even though we didn't have breakout rooms. Okay, so as I said, artificial intelligence by that definition doesn't have to be all that intelligent. So I think someone actually in the comments may have already given this example. You can have a heart rate monitor. If it goes out of range, it provides a alert, let's say, to the nurse's station, and then that maximizes their efficiency in that they're not rotating over and over and over in each room, right? They can have they can have fewer nurses at the nurse station for many of the hospital rooms or whatever setting you're in. A non-medical version, your thermostat is technically an artificial intelligence. If the temperature is too cold, according to the settings, it will turn the heater on all on its own in order to maximize your comfort. Newer thermostats like the Nest and all these other ones actually do have machine learning built into them. So this is the like base level AI, and then the machine learning is like learning your habits and then like trying to adjust stuff to change, to also not just maximize your comfort, but to maximize your electric bill or gas bill or whatever. In terms of different categories, there's, so what kinds of different types of AI are there? So I already mentioned those three bases. In fact, I'll go back, right? Supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement. So I'll just briefly talk about those a tiny bit more. So supervised learning is, I'm going to talk about two kinds. One is regression, and the most common one that you've all probably done at some point or another is fit a line to a data set where you have X and Y. That is supervised learning. The catch is for that two-dimensional scenario where you have one input, one output, there's an analytical mathematical solution to it, so it's not hard. But let's say you have 15 numerical variables that all play a role, and you want to predict an output value due to those, that you can use machine learning for that. So you start with a what are called features, in this case, the expression of a gene, and then the survival time based on survival time for a disease or something of that sort. And then you collect the data and you create a model. And so in the model is then, if I have this expression level of the gene, I can expect to live this many years. Again, a little bit dark. Classification is a different, can also be supervised. So we have various features or categories. Those are over here. This is this PC1 and PC2. So this data, your inputs can be multidimensional. You can have more than two inputs, but it's hard to draw that on a graph. And so there's something people do called principal component analysis. I don't have time to cover that, but let's just say these two have been identified out of a whole set to be kind of the most important, and they have the most, they create the most difference among the groups. So whatever this principal component 1 and principal component 2, we have all kinds of categories now of what those are. And so so it trains on this information and then takes a guess. So if I'm going to use the annotate feature here, right? If I have a new data point right, are you guys able to see that? Did the star pop up? Okay, yeah. If I have a new data set here, like our natural intelligence would suggest what, that it's in the red category, right? If I have one here, it's an orange, right? So we can kind of take, clearly this is a dark green category. The harder ones are like, what if it's here? What if it's here? What if it's here, right? So those get a little bit trickier, and AI isn't perfect either, but at least it's reproducible if you train it. Okay. Oh, yeah, I did it with the stars. Then there's unsupervised learning. I just have this data and I want to see what's different about it. And you can kind of, again, with our natural intelligence, we can see these kind of groups, and hopefully the computer can find clusters. And then once again, same idea as before, it'll choose which category or group it belongs to. If I come up with a medical example for it, right? You know, some life habits, some gene expressions, some whatever as the inputs, and they're like, you know, likely to become diabetic, likely to have heart disease, likely to something else, or likely to live 100+ years, and cluster that. And so it can make predictions for you. And then reinforcement learning, that's kind of more classic. And there's these in terms of maybe classic, I don't know. Anyway, they have these fancy words of agent and environment, state, reward, and action, but your agent is the thing that makes the decision. So in this case, the computer program. Your environment is what you're carrying it for. So in this case, the patient. So let's, for example, have a computer program that decides how much IV fluid to deliver, and the patient, we will measure the state of the patient as how much IV fluid was delivered, and then the reward is if their blood pressure improved. If it didn't, then you would reinforce downwards. Question before I go on?
Yes. Sorry. Should we hold our questions to the end, or are we allowed to ask questions?
No, interrupt. Yeah.
Okay.
interrupt all the way.
It was about the IV, delivering IV fluid. Are there AI systems that can actually deliver IV fluid or measure how much a patient would need? No,
Not that I
Okay.
know of. So right now, my understanding, and this is, I don't know how up to date I am on it, but I mean, even there's obvious ones like this. There's also the like perfusion pharmacology kind of delivery stuff that seems like it should be pretty obvious, that like it can measure and decide the dose.
Oh.
But I don't, it's hard to convince the FDA
Yeah, I'm sure.
that it's safe. So the number one concern of the FDA is that it's safe and effective, and safe comes first before anything. So it's really hard to prove that something's going to work when you can't prove that you're going to have the same action every time.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, but you know, in this example, right? So I'm assuming this person's blood pressure is too low because maybe they bled out a bit and their blood volume's too low, their blood pressure is low. I mean, okay, maybe they would actually need blood, not some other just regular IV fluid. But again, I'm not a medical person. I like to think of the human body as just like a wet engineering system. So we have our pumps, we have our electricity, we have, you know, tissues and bones and things, but my engineer in me always thinks of it that way. Okay, yeah, so yeah, it doesn't exist yet. Not because the technology doesn't exist, this would be pretty straightforward to implement. It's the training data and the proving that it's safe that is the strongest barrier right now. So and then exactly, so once the patient receives some fluid, the state is like, how much IV fluid was delivered and what is their current blood pressure. The reward is like, if they got an improvement, then keep adding IV fluid until it starts to hurt them. So it's kind of like a find the right amount until they balance out. That's also kind of a shady concept, is like wait until it starts hurting them and then stop and go back. Also, you might have to include, if it's medications, right? Everybody's, what's it called, their PK, how long it takes for drugs to take action and then start to dissipate. Some nice ones would be like it delivers in doses, so it actually keeps you level rather than going through humps, right? So that's why sometimes we take 1 pill a day because it has a very slow decay. Sometimes they tell you to take something 3 times a day because it rises in your bloodstreams, falls, and so you have to take it again to like make sure you're kind of steady. Yeah, so there's lots of different applications to machine learning. This one's like categorized in those three groups. So image classification works for med devices, diagnostics, obviously, various kinds of predictions you can imagine in there as well. Robot navigation, actually, we now have medical device robotics, remote surgery, things like that. That's definitely in there. Marketing, not so much. Yeah, so most of the stuff for med devices happens in these 2 categories, not so much the unsupervised. And then here's a funny biotech application. Okay. Now you're, okay, hold on. Let me find this funny YouTube video, which you guys know what a Roomba is, like the like robot vacuum. I'm going to load the video. Hold on, full theater mode, full screen. Share again. Okay, just let me know if you can hear the audio.
Any pet owner knows that, but
Can you hear audio?
one of these accidents, the Roomba made it worse. Well, no one signed up for that. Sounds like a job for iRobot engineering. Poop comes in many shapes and sizes. We built over 100 physical models of poop. We trained our algorithms on over 100,000 images. At the end of the day, it worked. And the Roomba J7 comes fully equipped to both identify and avoid. Number 2.
Anyway, I think that's funny. That's my example of of a biotech application, right? A lot of medical stuff is not clean, and that's kind of a joke as well, but biology is messy and gooey and different shapes, and every person's different, and so using AI can be helpful, but as they claimed here, it takes a lot of training data. So that's the other thing, is like, where do you get training data for people's health? Let's see. So we were gonna do an activity. We're gonna have to so I have a set of activities. We're gonna do it in a different way, again, not using breakout rooms, but you can choose to continue with the idea you had. So we had many ideas because we were in the group chat. Think about what the artificial intelligence would be doing, and do we want it, would it fall under supervised, unsupervised, or reinforcement? What data would it need to collect? And then I have some other stuff. Okay. Stop share. I have the chat open. Oh, we have new ideas here too. So I didn't get to read all of them. Narcolepsy and seizures, right? Maybe predicting those in advance would be good, so that people don't hurt themselves if they fall over, or if they're driving or something like that. Oscillation, that's good. So that's like hearing things through your like I'm so bad. I'm like, I teach med devices and I can't stethoscope. So that's like hearing sounds through the stethoscope and being able to interpret it. There are some digital stethoscopes out there. One of the things that's kind of interesting, but it's not, so there's a huge part of it that's like where you place it, of course, and then there's having the right kind, having good enough hearing to do it, and then there's the interpreting of it. So there are digital ones that record, and then you can send those recorded files anywhere. So maybe the person, this is really good for like remote places. And I was told about one of the faculty in our pharmacy school. She did a stint in Alaska and some like super remote, one of those little chain islands, and there was basically no access to anything except like once a month a boat would come by, and there's nobody, no physician that would like live on this island of a few hundred people. And so they had this huge, it wasn't huge. They had a telehealth system, and then they had like a rotating nurse that, or in her case, the pharmacist that would come by. And so the telehealth would be like someone that's qualified enough to use the instruments and know, again, where to place the stethoscope device, but all that data would get transferred and remotely diagnosed by someone. And I guess post-COVID, this, I learned about this before COVID. Post-COVID, we're all a little bit more comfortable with telehealth. There were a lot of questions that quickly got solved in a time of need. They also had a secured vending machine of pharmaceuticals. So that was kind of cool. They could get a prescription and the vending machine would drop it out for them. But secured, of course, because, all right, where was I going about let's pick one. Yeah, since I've been talking about this auscultation, let's pick that example. So what would it be doing, right? Let's presume there's still a healthcare provider that knows where to place it. So the AI would take the recording, do some signal processing. I actually teach a biomedical signal processing class, so that's one of my favorite topics. And as stated here, this is Matthew Chan, identify murmurs and grade severity. So what are those? I think they both have to be supervised, right? We need training data to understand, to tell the computer this is a heart murmur, this is not a heart murmur. One would be classification, that like it is or is not a heart murmur, and the other would be a regression, which says how severe is it, like on a scale. What data does the AI need to collect to operate? It needs to collect the sounds. So someone still has to be there to talk to the patient, apply the stethoscope, talk them through the diagnosis. So sometimes I get asked, do I think doctors are going to be replaced? Absolutely not. It will always keep changing. What doctors did 100 years ago is very different than what doctors do now. But they will be there, and hopefully it will help alleviate some of the healthcare in the sense that there's generally not enough doctors around for our population size, and there's not enough doctors around in certain areas, so that makes it even harder. And so maybe with technology, instead of all those folks that feel like they're being rushed in and out and unheard, there would be time to have actual longer, more meaningful conversations, and all the like, stuff where you feel ignored, where they're like busily typing ICD-10 codes into their computer and being like next, that would go away with the help of other technologies, and then make it so that there's more interpersonal stuff. All right, so back to the screen share. So we're choosing the stethoscope, the AI stethoscope. So we can answer these questions together, or maybe I'll just, no, let's do that in the chat as well. Hold on. Chat, open my chat. Okay, what's the condition targeted by the software? We've already answered this, right? So open chat, open. So this would be heart murmurs, right? So for products, so this is a little bit of my less engineering side and more of the business side. So we also have our Masters of Business and Science program, which and they have a lot of classes about like, what are the, and I don't mean business in like this, like greedy, I need to make lots of money. It's like, if we're going to help people, we have to figure out how many people need this, who's going to need this, how we can price it, and stuff like that. So something like, what's the incidence or prevalence of the condition? I don't know. Google search. I'm going to write Google search for prevalence. I'm sure there's better ways to do that, but that would be an important question to answer if you're going to design a device or a thing like this. Who's the user of the AI? Is it the patient?
I would think the doctor, whatever.
The doctor, right? The provider. So provider is kind of a general term because some people get healthcare from doctors. Some people will get it sort of at a staged, like at a nurse. I remember in my undergrad, our health center had just nurses, and they were like the stopgap before we were allowed to see a doctor. And some people will get some care at a pharmacy, so it might be a pharmacist. And hopefully, if they do recognize something, oh, thank you. Francisco says, heart murmurs are very common, 10% of adults. You could have shared that to everybody. That's okay. Yeah, so the user of the software, unless, yeah, it would be the provider. But a lot of people especially nowadays, want access to their own information. People are curious, so it's a little bit of both, right? And so that ECG one that we talked about, the live core that's now the Apple Watch, it's sort of for both, right? Because the person is wearing it and they're the first person to see it, and then they would notify their provider about what they see on their watch. They'd be like, I'm having anyway. What's the clinical function, right? So it's not like we're just doing it for the fun of it. It's so that we can make a decision, or so the clinical function is, I guess, identifying heart murmurs. Sometimes it's less obvious, so I don't think there's much more to say about that. And then what are the limitations of the current standard of care? And does this actually fix something? So what clinical benefit does this software attempt to address? Right, so just because a computer can do it doesn't necessarily mean we need it to do it if the current standard of care is good enough. So thinking about that, like the limitations of the current standard of care could be like, it's time consuming, it takes training, there can be variability between who's doing the measurements, there could be a low access to people who can do it. And so, so this would, the clinical benefit would be like, it's presumably reliable, standardized, and accessible. This is the things that I would say to this. And I would have made you guys do this if we had breakout rooms. That's okay. All right, and then the next slide, the business opportunity. So this would be, again, more towards our Masters of Business and Science students. So if I put some of our programs at KGI all together, our med device engineering group of students would come up with ways to implement this. Our pre-med and sort of MS students would come up with clinical needs and explain all of that to the students in advance to know what they're designing for. And then our MBS students that focus on business and regulatory would figure out ways to see how to target it, how to market it, what those other pieces are. So what's the addressable market? Apparently 10% of adults. That doesn't mean 10% of adults are going to have this device at home. So that's not quite the market size, but coming up with how many different facilities, locations, and stuff could potentially benefit from having something like this. So that would be, that would involve studies of like counting up hospitals and counting up doctors' offices and things like that. And that data is actually hard to come by. So it takes a lot of research to figure stuff out. How much are you going to charge for it? Oh, you know, healthcare is not free, especially not here in the US. So there's different ways of pricing. So two common ways to price stuff: reference pricing. So compare it to what's being currently charged. And so that doesn't mean how much does a stethoscope cost. It means how much does the stethoscope with the person who's able to diagnose those murmurs cost together, right? So like, and then say, well, we can do that faster and a little bit cheaper, something like that. And then there's the economic or value pricing. How much is it worth to know whether you're having a heart murmur or not? And those are really hard calculations. And this is where you get into all the crazy stuff with what they call the death boards and stuff. Question, Rome?
Hi, I can. I had a question about how do you calculate or determine what is the like the value of not having a disease? How do people calculate that?
Yeah, so I'm not a business person. I've heard many presentations on it over my years at KGI. So there's this like quality of life, and there are actual metrics to like to people's happiness. It's a bit weird. You know, like how much people, based on other decisions people have made, how much they're willing to pay or put in to get a certain like amount of mobility or self-care or yeah, It's a hard one.
That's a weird question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My life is worth infinity, but there's no insurance company that's going to pay infinity to keep me alive, right?
Right. Yeah.
I was
Right.
actually gonna ask, is it kind of like the same metrics they use for life insurance policies, kind of?
Yeah, kind of like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, health insurance companies do this all the time. And that's why, like, so when you have, that's how they decide what kind of things are covered and not covered. And yeah. So market size, that's how much money overall can be. So that doesn't mean it's your profits. That's like the revenue possibility, which is how many people times how much you could charge for it. And then you get a market share, which is a part of that. Assuming you don't have a monopoly on this market, you're gonna get 10% of all the potential users, because some competitor is going to come up with a similar something. So you get a fraction of this. And so that who would be the competitors. So if I'm going to see, I'm going to do it off to the side and I'll come back in a sec. So if I just search digital stethoscope on Google, we have things like on this front. So a stethoscope for $329. It's digital. What does it do? You know, it adjusts the volume and it probably can record it. This one does ECG and stuff. So they're that's an ultrasound, that 5K. This one's another funny one. So I've actually looked at these before. I don't think they do AI because, again, I don't think they're approved for that. But like this one doesn't even have the ear thing because they're like, well, you just hold it up and then play it on a microphone or on your phone or whatever. So why have the ear things at all? And that's another funny kind of marketing thing to decide. Like, well, people feel comfortable having the stethoscope on their ears. Patients might feel more comfortable feeling like they're being treated with a standardized device. Yeah. Actually, all of this makes me say, so way back when we defined med devices: diagnose, treat, mitigate, or prevent a disease or condition. So a stethoscope just on its own is not doing the diagnosing, right? So it's there's categorizations of how dangerous or novel is the wrong word, how complicated and or dangerous medical devices are. Stethoscopes are kind of on the lowest, right? They're kind of an established technology a long time ago, very few moving parts, not a lot to, you know, if it's not functioning correctly, it's easy for the person to figure out, like, I can't hear anything. The software, the AI that we're talking about would be doing diagnosing. And so now it becomes a whole another category of device. Let's go forward. And then that's it. That's my lecture, lecture session. Hopefully you had some entertaining points in there. If you want to learn about machine learning with Python, this is a good website for that. Oh my gosh, I have all these other slides. That's it for the AI. I'll just, you know, I'm just gonna browse through this super quick. We're in the middle of our med device bootcamp this year. We have an online sessions if you ever choose to do. I know you're already in a summer program, but if you choose to do a different one on med device development, we have an online version that lasts 2 weeks, and then we have an in-person version that lasts 5 weeks, and we make prototypes and stuff. And then more about the degree. So I will share these slides. Here's our lab, our maker lab. So this is the low, they're just cutting out paper and stuff. So it's like low fidelity prototypes, just get people to understand your concept without having to necessarily build something that's functional. Oops. For 3D printers, these are actually defunct now. We have different sets, but it was fun to video them all kind of going at once. Oh, and then the laser cutter. So excited. I stare at the machines doing stuff too. So she's like watching the laser cut stuff out. Anyway, I don't want to keep you through your whole lunch, and I have something at 1 as well. So if you have more questions, you have interests, I'm open to any kind of questions. You can email me Anna_Hickerson@KGI. This is a calendar link similar to Calendly if you've used that with other people. If you want to set up a Zoom call, and then the admissions folks. So that's it. How's your lunch? All right, so I will sign off. Thanks everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
everyone.
much. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Quit though.
I need your help.